Well, hello, I'm Emma from English. Today, I want to share an important tip to help you improve your English pronunciation. Actually, I'll share a couple of tips, but they all relate to the pronunciation of past tense regular verbs. Now, the spelling of regular verbs is easy. You just take the regular verb and you add a D or an ED to the end of the infinitive form. So some examples: want becomes wanted, ask becomes asked, and rain becomes rained. Or if the verb actually ends in a Y, then usually we replace that Y with an I and then add ED. Spied and replied. But the pronunciation of these simple verbs is not quite that simple. But that's okay. We're going to spend some time today going over 3 simple rules that you need to remember to help you pronounce these verbs correctly. But before we get started, I want to ask you a question. Have you subscribed to the English channel yet? Yes? Awesome! Make sure you let me know in the comments so that I can give you a virtual high five just to thank you for your support. If you haven't subscribed yet, it's so simple. All you need to do is hit that red button just down there. Oh, and one more thing. If you haven't watched my lesson about irregular verbs yet, I'm going to put it up here for you. Since we're talking about regular verbs in this lesson, it will be helpful to compare the pronunciation between regular verbs and irregular verbs. So check it out after you watch this lesson. Okay, past tense regular verbs. So for regular verbs, the form is the same in the past simple and the past participle forms. Handy, right? The first thing that you need to know is that there are actually 3 different ways to pronounce the ED at the end of a past tense verb. 3. Id, d, and t. The good news is there are 3 simple rules to remember that will help you to pronounce these words correctly. Firstly, ED can be pronounced as id. So this is an unstressed vowel sound, and it creates an extra syllable which is always unstressed. So the sound is short and it's low in pitch. And it's pronounced like this when the regular verb in its infinitive form ends in a T or a D sound. Need becomes needed. Last becomes lasted. Plead becomes pleaded. Accept becomes accepted. Waste becomes wasted. And wait becomes waited. Okay, so these ones are kind of simple. The extra unstressed vowel sound makes them quite easy to pronounce. Waited, needed. The other 2 ways to pronounce the past tense regular form don't include that vowel sound, which means that it doesn't create this extra syllable, and it does create a cluster of consonants at the end of the word. And as many of you know, a cluster of consonants, that's a group of consonants, can often be really quite difficult to pronounce. So let's take a closer look. When a verb in its infinitive form ends in a voiced consonant sound, we pronounce the ED at the end of the word as d. Not id, but d, 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 d. There's no vowel sound there, right? But what's a voiced consonant sound? I can hear you asking. Well, I've already got a lesson that explains this in more detail right here, but I'll give you the short version right now. These are the voiced consonant sounds. G as in good, l as in love, as in red, v as in vet, z as in zoo, w as in well, as in new, as in mum, as in sing, the at the end, v as in this, j as in vision, and j as in jam. Right, so if the infinitive verb ends in one of these sounds, then the ed is pronounced as d. Allow, ending in the w voiced consonant sound, becomes allowed. Not allowed. No, this is a really, really common error. It's not allowed, but allowed. It's not sailed, but sailed. Waved, rained, rubbed, loved, gazed, judged. Okay, so a quick note on my Australian accent. In Australia, we don't pronounce the final R consonant sound when it follows a vowel sound. So this is the same for standard British English pronunciation. You can learn more about the differences in accents in this video here, where I talk about the differences between American and British English. But this difference in pronunciation, it doesn't affect the pronunciation rules for past tense regular verbs, because vowel sounds are also voiced sounds, just like the sound. So regardless of whether you pronounce the or not, the ed will be pronounced as a d sound, like feared and feared. That's again my excellent American accent. But this also means that if a regular verb ends in a vowel sound, like spy, for example, then the ed is pronounced as a d as well. Spied, not spied. Okay, rule number 3. When a verb in its infinitive form ends in an unvoiced consonant sound, we pronounce the ed as a t. So not id, not d, but t, 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 t. So that is an unvoiced sound. So again, there's no vowel sound. It's a single consonant sound that is added to the end of the infinitive verb form. So some of the unvoiced consonant sounds are the p in tape, s in face, ch in watch, sh in wash, f in laugh. Now this can be a little tricky when the verb form already has a cluster of consonants at the end, like the sk in ask or the x in relax. So ask becomes asked. Relax becomes relaxed. So these are a little tricky because they have a crazy group of consonants at the end that you've got to try and get your tongue around. Okay, a quick review before we practice. If the verb in the infinitive form ends in the sound t or d, it's pronounced id. If the verb in the infinitive form ends in a voiced sound, then the ed is pronounced as d. And if the verb in its infinitive form ends in an unvoiced sound, then we pronounce the ed as a t sound. If you want to improve your pronunciation and sound more like a native English speaker, then you really need to work on pronouncing these past tense verbs correctly. They're so simple and so common. Wanted, needed, id. Loved, sailed, d. Asked, laughed, t. Okay, so before we finish, let's practice with a few sentences because it's easy to practice these words when they're on their own, right? It's much more of a challenge when spoken quickly in a sentence, right? Have you noticed the verbs here? And have you been thinking about the correct way to pronounce them? Hated, wasted, starved. She hated to see good food wasted while others starved. She hated to see good food wasted while others starved. What verbs can you see there? Waited, sailed, laughed, realized, escaped. He waited until the ship sailed away and then laughed when he realized he had escaped. He waited until the ship sailed away and then laughed when he realized he had escaped. Last one. Misjudged, seemed, phoned. I think I misjudged his character. He seemed pleasant and professional when I phoned him yesterday. I think I misjudged his character. He seemed pleasant and professional when I phoned him yesterday. Well, that's it for this lesson, I'm afraid. I hope that you've learned a couple of new pronunciation tips and that you are feeling more confident and sounding more natural when you're using English. To keep practicing and improving your English pronunciation, then come and try one of my imitation lessons right here. That's where you'll get to train by copying a native English speaker as they speak. And of course, subscribe to my channel just down here if you haven't already. And I'll see you next week for another lesson. Bye for now.